Hi, everyone. This is Lynanne. I am your host here with the Inspiration Series, and I'm the founder of Divine Reset. And we are here today for some more inspiration on ways that you can have more peace and happiness in your lives. Trying to break old patterns that are not working for you. And sometimes we might have to just take a really difficult look in the mirror and see some things that it's not working. I got to make some changes. So the guest that we have today, he is back number 2, second time. And this is Kenyon Curtis. He is a dear friend who's helped me through a lot of personal things. And he's a fabulous resource with a lot of training. He's helped countless people. He's very successful in business as a mentor, and he is here on his time to give us some knowledge to help us to take some ownership. So Kenyon, tell us about it. How are you doing?
Okay, I'm doing great. Thanks, Lynn, and it's always good to see you and chat with you. Anytime I, hear from you or, see a little text from you pop up, it's, I get a little smile. It's always good. And especially I love being a part of anything that is helping build other people up. Sometimes, I don't remember if I did this last time, but I definitely want to share a little bit more of my story because I just thought of this when you were saying that, I have had a lot of training because I do know people that have had a lot of training, but they haven't always had their own journey. And it's good that they know things. And I don't think it has to be, but I think it is more powerful if you come from a place of I've been there. And, about 7 or 8 years ago is really when I started my, I guess, the journey that I'm on now, which is a much different path than where I was going. And where I was going was really nowhere. I mean, relationship with my spouse, it was okay, just not that great. With my kids, I was doing my best as a dad. We had some fun and stuff, but I really wanted to be a much better father than I was to them. I wanted to be the kind of dad that they felt like was there for them, and I wanted that, and I was trying, but didn't really have the skills to do it. And so a lot of my training, or I guess what has gotten me to where I'm at, is going through my own process and understanding where I was to where I am now, and understanding what I went through to get there. And so it's real easy to then talk to someone and say, hey, I see this challenge you're going through. If you're interested, if you want to make some progress or make some, things better, or, feel a little happier or whatever, if you're open to that, then we can have a conversation, and hearing a little bit about what I went through will help, but it's really through your own experiences that are going to make a difference. In fact, is it okay if I keep going?
Yeah, please take it away.
Okay. Because I was just thinking, I was just watching, I'm a big movie buff, and I've always enjoyed entertainment and movies, and it was mostly just because of the excitement and the emotion of it. And, I grew up in a small town, and so movies were a big escape. I think maybe that was one of the reasons back in the day, and that I really loved it. And it was always a good thing. Like my parents were always good at, whenever we'd go on a trip out of town, we'd usually hit a movie, and so movies just have a really emotional, a reaction or an emotional like memory for me. Time with family and exciting things. Watching Ghostbusters when it came out, and all the Indiana Jones movies, and those kinds of things that came out years ago. And so seeing movies is a big deal for us. But I was just watching. I'm not a huge fan of him, but he has made some pretty good movies with good meanings behind lessons in them, which is Adam Sandler. And he's he is at his heart, he's a cool guy. I don't know, just sometimes he does what I would call weird, rude, slightly crude stuff on some of his movies, right? But he has made some cute movies. But I was just watching Click the other day, and if you haven't seen that one, it's where he gets a remote that lets him control his life. And I don't want to give too much of it away, but if you just think It's a Wonderful Life done today, right? It's he had the chance to see his life in a different way through use of this remote. And I know that a lot of times I would watch movies like those, or I love movies like that, because it shows how someone can change. And he was showing up this way for his family, and then after his experience and all the stuff, crazy, shenanigans or whatever you want to call it, he had got into with remote, it changed him. And I would watch that, and I thought, okay, here we're watching, of course it's only, it's an hour and a half long, there's this dramatic change in people, and he went through all these things. And a lot of times you might watch a movie like that and think, oh, well, it's because of what he learned that helped him, make those changes. And it actually isn't. I mean, if you even look at the old movie of It's a Wonderful Life, it wasn't what he learned, it was what he experienced, right? Because he was experiencing his life in a different way through how the story of the movie, and those experiences are what changed him. So anytime, so one of the things I've learned through my training and through my own experience is the difference between, let's call it scholastic learning and experiential learning, right? Because it's real easy to say, like here's an example for me, and this is a very personal one. For me, it is, I know I shouldn't yell at my kids. I know I shouldn't lose my temper with my kids. I know that, but I do it. And in the past, I used to keep thinking, well, what do I need to learn? What book do I need to read? And what knowledge do I need to gain that's going to help me make that change? And it really wasn't a knowledge. Again, it was an experience. I'm going to share a couple things with you that are intended to be an experiential learning. And, but I just remember one day, my youngest daughter reached up in the cupboard and grabbed a box of cereal. And when she grabbed the cereal, she's a little short and it was a little high, and she pulled the cereal and it slipped and it spilled all over the floor. And I looked down, I was like, well, all right, grab a broom. We need to clean this up. And she looked at me, and this broke my heart. And it's like, it made me super, like, it broke my heart in two ways. It broke my heart, like in sadness and also in happy for what happened, because she looked at me and she goes, you're not going to yell at me. And it was a big awakening that I had changed. And she recognized it, obviously, because she was shocked, right, that I just didn't like blow up and lose my temper.
I don't think you're the only one that's had that
right?
that really amazing guilt and hooray at the same time.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And it was just, and even thinking about it, it's really, it hits me still, because it was a reminder of who I was and how I used to do things in my life before, and how much I've changed, which is great, because my kids deserve a parent like that, that can be there for them. And it was through some changes that I had made. And there's a lot. I will let you know that anytime I say a lot, I want to caution anyone listening to realize that it's not, you don't really need to learn a lot or experience a lot to get to where that change happens. What happens is you'll get a change here and there. And that change is very dramatic. But it only affects usually like one part. Like, for example, a friend of mine that I go to church with, she was having a challenge with a stepdaughter, right? And so here she is, mother, new spouse. They've got their own child who's 2 or 3 years old, and they have a stepdaughter, and the stepdaughter just rubs her wrong, and she loses her cool with her a lot and stuff. And so I was aware of the situation for probably about a year, and she came to me a couple times. And I talked to her one time and kind of got her thinking a little differently. It didn't really make that much difference, though. But then I talked to her again, and we went a little deeper into what was going on and how to look at it differently, and how to and to help push her into an experience around it rather than just learning something. And it wasn't maybe 2 or 3 weeks later. It was pretty recent. She texted me and she says, "Hey, I just want to let you know things are so much better with my stepdaughter." I was like, "That's awesome." And I said, "What changed?" She said, "I did." I said, "That's great, but let's break it down, right? Let's dissect that answer for you so you can understand what happened to take you from A to B. The more you understand how you got there, right? Like it's great if you woke up, oh my gosh, I woke up today and I now treat my kids differently. That's great, but you want to understand how that happened so you can do it again. So you can use that same process to do it again in other areas of your life. And I talked to her, and she shared one thing that I actually had prepared her for. and told her that this is the way, excuse me, this is the way it would happen, and it did. And she told me, she says, well, Kenyon, I really thought, right? I thought I was going to learn some things and I would get a little better and a little better and a little better. I said, but that's not how it works. That's not how true change of heart, change of being works. And she's like, I know. She says, she says, I'm not perfect. Like, she still bugs me a little bit. But she says, I went from like 10%, like if I was like 10% getting along with her, now I'm 80% getting along with her.
Wow.
And she didn't change her behavior. I changed me. I said, of course you did, because we've been having conversations about it and you're reading a book about it, and she was learning some things, but it was an experience that actually flipped, right? Because reading a book, she didn't read the book and wake up and treat her stepdaughter differently. She had an experience that finally flipped a switch for her. So, so there's many concepts involved with that. And this is where you can make jumps, right? Every step of the way in relation to many, many things. And one concept that it is one that is, in some ways, I don't want to say that it's entirely tough. In some ways it can be a challenge, because it does require you to look at yourself and look at your actions. And I'll share with you an experience that I had that helped me learn it. And anytime, now this is something to take with you. Anytime you hear someone else's story, it can be, right? It can be easy to observe their story as an observer and say, oh, that's great that it worked for them. So I'm going to challenge anyone hearing this, and from now going forward, to anytime you hear a story, try to find where areas that it will fit for you. Because I'll say, well, I was talking to my friend, and you're like, well, I'm not you, and you're a man and I'm a woman, or, you're whatever, gray and I'm blonde, and, and you try and find some differences to pull it apart from you and separate. Yeah, I've got a beard. Or like, you've got a beard and I don't. So sometimes we do that, where we try to separate ourselves from the story and to just observe the story. But the more you participate in the story and look for, okay, where does this show up for me? Like, for example, I was talking to one friend about being selfish, and she was like, well, I don't think I'm selfish that way. Oh, give me a break. Everybody is selfish in some way. Okay, everybody. And so if you say, well, but you were talking about being selfish in this way, yeah, that's fine. But so you are selfish in some ways. So don't separate it from you, and don't take the lesson that someone got from, that maybe overcame some selfishness, and don't make it so that it's so weird and strange and is so unique to you that it doesn't help you. Learn from it. Say, okay, great. So if that selfish showed up for them, how does that show up for me? And where does it show up for me? Maybe what can I do? And I really believe that the more you introspect these things, you'll make a lot more progress when you start to include yourself in the story. So here's my story after that lengthy introduction. So I was working for my mentor, and he is a great man, and we still are doing some things together. But he was really the one that taught me so much and helped me out, because it was just really just a short 7, maybe 8 years ago now that I met him, and I was in a place that was just not very good. I started at the beginning where I was saying that relationships with my kids not that great. They were okay, but not that great. Relationships with I will say my spouse at the time, right? It was okay. Had some good things going. Had some things that were not working very well. And at that time, I really saw my life differently, and I didn't know things then that I know now. And I was very curious why some things were working, some things weren't, and some days were horrible, and some days they were great, and why is it all over the place, right? And one of the things that was a big challenge was the relationship. And he, so I was working for him. It's kind of that's a whole other story, but I was working for him, and it was late in the day, not super late, but 4:30, 5 o'clock, and I was about ready to leave. And for whatever reason that day, it was just me and him left in the office. Everyone else had already gone. And he walked over into, I didn't even have like a cubicle or an office. I just had kind of a desk that I was working at in a space in his office. And he came over and he said, hey, Kenyon, how's it going? I said, it's going pretty good. He's like, but how's it going at home? And I said, what do you mean? He said, how are things going with your wife? I was like, how do you do that? Like, how do you just walk up and say that? Like, yes. He's like, I know. So tell me what's going on. I said, okay. So, right. I kind of had this, like, what's wrong? What do you mean? Everything's fine. No, what's wrong at home? What do you mean? Everything's fine. What's wrong with your wife? Okay. All right, fine. I'll tell you. Right. And I had to let go, and lower that wall and lower that barrier and have a real conversation. And, he said, what's going on? And I said, look, I'm a little frustrated right now. I said, I'm learning so much from you and I'm making so much progress. It's helping so much. It's helping me so much. I really want my wife to be on this journey with me. And I'll add some things, because looking back on it, I want her to be on it with me. I want her to have her own journey, to help her make some improvements that I knew that she wanted to, or I hope she wanted to make at the time. And I said, I'm really frustrated, because I'm like, hey, you should learn some of this, and let's talk about it, and let's listen to some things, and let's talk about some things. And she was very, very, I wouldn't even say hesitant. She was very resistant, right? She wasn't even like, oh, maybe not. It was like, no. Right. And, and it was frustrating for me, because it was helping so much. And even at one point, her and I had a conversation, and she said, whatever you're learning, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. And I said, why? She said, because you talk to me differently. I was like, that's interesting. Like, I hadn't even realized, like, as soon as she said it, I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. Just like the thing with my kids, right? Spill the cereal. Oh, well, let's clean it up instead of like lose my cool. But so things, I was changing, and it was little experiences. I shouldn't say little, but experience after experience after experience. It was getting me there. And I was about to have another one at this moment of the story I'm telling you, as you will too, as you pay attention and understand that there are some things that you can learn rather quickly that make a big difference. And so here I am explaining, okay, I'm moving forward. I feel like she's not. And he started to ask me some questions. And these are very interesting questions. And I believe these questions can fit many situations. He said, so you believe that she should move with you? He said, but why? I said, well, because we're married, and, we're like in this together and stuff. And he said, who made that rule? And I was like, oh. And that's when I had a little experience in my, right, in my being, in my brain, in my whatever, in my soul. It felt like, because I was hit with the realization, I think I made up that rule. Yeah. And he said, and I realized that sometimes you walk around with a lot of rules that you're so frustrated that other people aren't following, but you never talk to them about it. Right. And that's what he told me. He says, so, right. I know. He says, so you have this rule in your head. Have you had does she know that this is a rule? Well, no. He says, so let me get this straight. You're frustrated that someone is following a made up rule in your head that you haven't talked to them about. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I had never thought of it that way before. I'm like, well, when you put it that way.
Oh my goodness. That is so many parts of life.
It is with kids, with coworkers. I mean, this applies anywhere.
Yeah.
Right. And I was like, boy, all kinds of things were popping in my head. And I was like, oh my, like realizations of what I was doing. And he says, well, who really has the problem here then? And I hated to admit he was right. He was right. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's me. I'm like, well, I don't want to be the problem. Like, and part of me still tried to fight. I'm like, Michael, you don't understand. Like, she does this or she doesn't do that. Right. I tried to put it on her.
Yeah. And says, you're working, you're changing, you're applying stuff, you're putting forth the effort.
Right. And so I'm like, okay, well, I'm doing this and she's not, all right, or I'm not doing this anymore and she still is and stuff. And it was still, part of me was still trying to put it on her. And he says, Kenyon, you really want to understand the principle of taking ownership. Now, we'll let you know whatever you learn about ownership today will only be scratching the surface, because that for me was the beginning of learning the true meaning and value of taking ownership in my life. And since then I've learned, oh my gosh, so many other things and so much deeper perspectives of it. But at this moment, he says, you want to understand, he says, Kenyon, all of the challenges you have in your relationship are 100% on you. I'm like, no, come on. Like, I still, okay. It's like, all right, you help me. Like, I understand that a little bit, but that can't be, why all on me? I'm like, I just told you, she this, she that, she doesn't, blah, blah, blah. And he said, no, it's 100% ownership. You have full ownership in this. And I was just like, no, like, come on, you got to give me a break here. Like, I'm doing this and I'm doing this. Like, I was just defending my case, right? Against taking more ownership in this situation. And he said, well, let me ask you, if you were a better communicator, do you think things would be different with you and her right now? I was like, all right. Oh my gosh. Like, how do you,
okay, you're right again.
yes, you're right again. I was like, because he was giving me, and this was a great thing. This was a great thing about him is, and it's one thing I tell some of my own coaching clients that I work with in business and in different areas is I don't have all the answers, but I have all the questions. Because that was right. This was the biggest thing that helped me. He kept asking me questions and I was coming up with the answers that I could not disagree with because they made so much sense and they just clicked as being true. And even though I didn't like them, I didn't like the answers, but I had to admit that they were true, right? It was a big, oh my gosh, it was huge. And it really was a big way of looking in the mirror and saying, oh my gosh, this is me making this happen. But the benefit of that is when you can learn, and as you learn to take full ownership in what's going on around you, then it really does strengthen and empower you what's going on around you. And I've had this conversation with many business owners in different ways. And he says, look, because in any way, shape or form, ownership is on you. And he says, like, who asked each other to get married? Well, I asked her. He said, well, then it's on you. And if he was having, right, he says, well, you asked her and, you this and you that. And if you were a better communicator, I was like, oh my gosh. But it's the same thing. If he was having this conversation with her, he would have had the same conversation with her. It would be, but it would be different things. Well, if you were this or you were that, well, you said yes, you didn't have to say yes to him. Right. And as you realize all the things that lead up to where you are and understand that you have taken actions and made decisions and, that made a big difference in where you are now. And that is where, because just think about the experience with my child spilling the cereal. Well, if she hadn't spilled the cereal, then I wouldn't lose my cool. Those two things have nothing to do with each other.
You're so right.
Me losing my cool was 100% on me owning my emotions and my emotional reactions to things going on around me.
Wow.
So,
really, really great stuff. Thank you so much. You filled our time.
I just looked at that. I was like, you said to be done by 2:40. It's like 2:40.
Yeah, it's perfect. And thank you so much for sharing your personal experience. And also, I think that is such a great thing to remember, that we absolutely can learn from other people's experiences. Put yourself in the story so that you can make that shift happen and, sooner, because not everybody has a mentor like Kenyon Curtis or your mentor. And so that's what Inspiration Series is for. We want to help people. We want you to take these situations and stories and things that you hear and apply them so that your life can just be better. I mean, Kenyon, you've already said this before, that you're exponentially improved.
Yeah, and it's crazy.
Still climbing.
Look, I found an old video of myself and I watched it because I sometimes I have a hard time explaining to people or helping other people understand really where I was before. And I found an old video from about 6 or 7 years ago that I had shot, and it was somewhere on YouTube still floating around. And I showed it to a friend of mine, and because there's many friends that know me now, and I said, yeah, but take a look at this old video. What do you see? And she watched it, listened to it. She's like, oh my gosh, you are like, because you see the contrast between like how I talked and how I acted, how I showed up compared to now. It's totally different.
Yeah. Well, awesome. I thank you so much. I love having you come on as a guest, and yes, I want you to come back. So
okay.
To our listeners, we were kind of discussing together some things that what I wanted Kenyon to talk about, and we've already got something planned. So for next time.
Good.
So Kenyon, people can reach out to you if they would like some extra coaching.
Yeah, they could totally talk about that. Have them just right now, have them totally hit me up on Facebook. I do have
Kenyon
my own, Kenyon Curtis. I do have my own coaching program right now, but I'm building a different one with somebody else, and so it's just kind of all over the place right now. But you can hit me up on Facebook. That'd be great.
Okay, that is so awesome. Thank you so much, and listeners, have a wonderful week. We'll see you next week on Tuesday at 10:30 a.m. Mountain Standard Time on the Divine Reset page. And please go to Facebook and like Divine Reset if you haven't done that yet. And then you'll continue to get more awesome content like today. Thank you so much, Kenyon.
You're welcome.